Whether it's from farmers markets like this or your neighborhood grocery store, food is one of the basic necessities of life. It gives us the energy we need to stay active, the nutrients we use for growth, and can help prevent diet-related illnesses. Even more than that, in many cultures, food is used as a way of gathering and unity, enjoyment as we explore the different flavors that make up our world. But for many families in the United States, food is seen as a luxury they just can't afford, and that can be a fatal issue. I'm Kylie Ambu, and on today's Mutually Inclusive, we're unwrapping the layers of food insecurity and showing you what our neighbors are doing to pass the plate. Food equity is the name of the game in the movement to fight hunger. It's basically this expansive concept in which all people have the ability and opportunity to grow and consume healthy, affordable, and culturally significant foods. If food equity is the goal, food insecurity is the issue. While there's levels to food insecurity, at its core, it's when you're not able to access or afford the food needed for overall health and well-being. In some cases, it can mean actually going hungry. But in others, it can look like reduced quality, variety, or desirability of food intake. For example, say I'm a single parent of 3 who works 2 jobs and there's not a grocery market with fresh produce nearby. There's no way I can make it all the way down to the nearest store before close, let alone spend the gas money to get there. So the cheapest option may be the fast food restaurant down the street, taking advantage of its dollar menu. Now, there is no shame at all to the fast food game. My mom was a single parent, and we would often run through the drive-thru on busy days. But while we are being fed, we aren't necessarily getting the nutrition it takes to live our healthiest life. And with continued intake of less nutrient-dense foods, the risk of developing life-threatening conditions like heart disease, diabetes, and some forms of cancer rise. Heart disease is currently the leading cause of death in the United States. And that's something health providers have spotted, and Trinity Health West Michigan is working to combat. Let's take a look at its latest program focused on prescribing health.
When you hear the word prescription, what comes to mind? Maybe a doctor's appointment, a trip to the pharmacy. For a handful of patients in Sparta, Michigan, it's an array of fresh produce.
The idea behind this is to make medicine, which is kind of a very narrow thing, into a much broader thing of things like health equities.
Trinity Health Medical Group in Sparta has partnered with North Kent Connect to offer patients and their families a prescription for health. The program works to address chronic conditions, such as diabetes or hypertension, by removing the burden of food access.
To have people come to our doors and not just expect a prescription, but expect some help with navigating health issues.
Families battling food insecurity with at least 2 children and 1 family member with a chronic health condition were invited to join the Prescription for Health program. The USDA defines food insecurity as a lack of consistent access to enough food for every person in a household to live an active, healthy life, meaning it's not just having access to food, but being able to secure the right kinds of nutrients for fuel.
If I sign on, I'm going to take seriously my food, what I eat, because we want to lose weight for a long time ago, but nobody was watching us.
Along with weekly boxes of fruit, vegetables, and other nutrient-dense foods, participants are equipped with pots and pans, health classes, blood pressure cuffs, and more to work towards their health progress and goals. In other words, the grant-funded program asks the question: if food barriers are eliminated, will health outcomes improve? So far, the answer is yes.
And I think I lose weight doing that this way, eating healthy, eating more vegetables. I lose like probably 20 pounds, 25 pounds when I started doing this. Doing my normal job and a little bit of exercise, because I started doing a little bit, maybe like 10-15 minutes of exercise.
But again, it's mostly for health. It's not about how you look, and it's not about how people perceive you, because that's internal, that's not external. You know, that sort of thing is really important, as that it doesn't define you. And we never say we're worried about your weight, we're worried about, you know, the cardiovascular problems.
Trinity Health says this is a step to spread health access in new ways and recognize food for the vital medicine that it is, saying in order to address chronic illness, we need to address food insecurity.
We don't expect it's going to be a voila moment to get it. It's going to be something that really to learn what's going on with your diet, how you can change it to make it better, how you can change it even more to make it really good.
Data shows 13.5 million U.S. households were food insecure at some point during 2021. These rates went largely unchanged from 2020, when numbers spiked during the pandemic. While food insecurity can hit individuals and families of all backgrounds, some populations are more vulnerable. The USDA shows single mother households have the highest rates for food insecurity, along with Black and Hispanic families, who have historically been pushed out of wealth-building systems, leading to disproportionate rates of hunger. Our migrant and undocumented neighbors also have some of the highest rates, which the National Institutes of Health says can be related to federal policies that have blocked them from accessing food and health aid programs. In Muskegon, a food-based nonprofit is taking a unique approach to knocking down the pattern of systemic oppression, and it just might start with creating the opportunity for thriving food business. WGVU's Jennifer Moss is in the studio with Lakeshore Flavor's Andrea Copeland to discuss her plans of investing in community and building economic growth for all.
Andrea Copeland, board president of Lakeshore Flavor, thanks so much for joining us today. We're happy to have you here with us.
Thank you for having me.
You know, we've been talking about food equity and, of course, then touching on food insecurities. Kylie Ambu, of course, had a story on that preceding this interview. And your goal is actually food entrepreneurship for persons of color, basically what we would look at as economic food security. And you're with Lakeshore Flavor. What is your mission there?
So our mission is to really amplify existing food businesses in Muskegon County, but also to eliminate barriers for those that have food businesses or really want to engage in food systems within Muskegon County. So whether that's access to capital, access to business resources, and also production space. Those are the main three areas that our operations are focused on to really support those that already have a passion for food business within Muskegon County, or really just have never really had the resources to create their brand and to launch. And so we're here in the community really to support those that are passionate about food businesses, but also to support those that want to be creative within that space as well.
Absolutely. And so how did Lakeshore Flavor come to be? You have a lot of representation on your board from throughout the community, correct?
Yes, yeah, that's correct. And so I actually worked with a nonprofit food incubator out of Atlanta about 3 years ago. I wrote a grant for their team, and that's when I was first introduced to nonprofit incubators and also understanding how they are mission focused, but also drive economic development while also eliminating barriers. And so I worked with them for about 3 years on and off to support their operations, but also to ask questions about how they came to be. And through that work, I was able to connect directly with the Hatchery Chicago, and I did some formal consulting with them to understand how that food incubator works, how they came to be, you know, and also how they tangibly eliminate barriers for food entrepreneurs in the city of Chicago, South Side. And so, you know, I've been working on this project for about 2 years now. And I decided to formally organize Lakeshore Flavor with a very specific goal of amplifying businesses and really supporting those that, you know, don't have the resources, but we can create that for them. So.
And what you're doing, you're trying to eliminate some of those barriers, because starting a business can be challenging for anyone. But we know that it can be even more difficult for the BIPOC population, persons of color.
Exactly.
So tell me about that. What are the things you're trying to help create and break some of those barriers? Because there's capital investment, there's the actual buildings, which is why we have cottage industry, but a lot of that can't happen because they don't have the kitchens, which is what part and parcel of what you would like to see happen.
Exactly. And so the first challenge that a lot of food entrepreneurs have is access to production space. And so, as you mentioned, there is cottage food law, which exists in the state of Michigan, but it prevents you from being able to really grow and to scale your business. And so that's where shared kitchens come into play, and commercial kitchens, where you're able to, utilize industrial equipment to create your product. But there are challenges in terms of being able to access those spaces, but also the prevalence of space that exists in Muskegon County is very limited. And so for us, we want to develop an additional kitchen space in Muskegon County that specifically, focuses on food trucks, caterers, bakers, folks that are interested in product research or product development, and, creating connections within that space as well.
Because again, we talk about those barriers. There are very limited numbers of minority-owned businesses and those that then can kind of move forward, correct?
Exactly.
Give me those numbers. You had some stats that we...
So one of the challenges that we've identified within our team is that nearly 1% of Black-owned businesses receive bank capital within their first year of operations, in comparison to 7% for non-minority business owners. In addition to that, women-owned businesses as well reported that 62% of those groups utilize their income from their food business and their business in general to maintain living and basic household needs. But they struggle with the ability to procure capital and funding for their operations. And so even if you have an amazing product or an amazing idea, the ability to procure resources to bring that together creates barriers in the community.
And that is what part of what Lakeshore Flavor is striving to do, is to break down those barriers. Now, you were successful in getting a very unique fund, the Food and Farmers Communication Fund, where you're having these listening sessions. Tell us about that, because that is a great step in progress in being able to open up some doors and kind of remove some of those barriers.
Yes, and so our organization is only one of 3 in the state of Michigan that has been funded by Food and Farm Communications Fund, and their mission focus as it relates to their grantees is really food and farm systems change across the United States. And so for us, it's really exciting because by receiving this funding, it literally put Muskegon County on the map, first of all. And secondly, the focus for this funding is to understand and really focus in on what food businesses need, what the challenges have been, what is working in Muskegon County, and how we can build upon that within both our programs and our facility in Muskegon.
Okay, and so you're making strides with that. Now, one of the biggest goals, or part of your hope, is to create that actual incubator space, and that's what you've got listening sessions going on, much like the Grand Rapids market, right? What do you hope to have for the community of Muskegon when it's all said and done? And Lakeshore Flavor is totally, I mean, you're already got a space in Muskegon that you're working out of, but this is the incubator space is what you're really wanting to push forward.
Yes, so waving my magic wand, what I want Lakeshore Flavor to be, and what it will be in Muskegon County, is really a hub that is focused on and specialized in food business development. And so the ability to create a space for food production, but also business resources and connecting, new entrepreneurs with very seasoned folks within food industry under the same brick and mortar. And so that's really what we plan to create. And so our space will include a commercial kitchen space for production and food development, a teaching kitchen also to support nonprofit initiatives and also healthcare outcomes in Muskegon County, in addition to allowing food businesses to utilize that teaching kitchen to conduct classes to amplify their brand at the same time. Additionally, our space will include a venue space for private and public events for the community as well, in addition to staff space and office space for our classes that we will host throughout the county.
Lots of big plans. How soon will we see some of this developing, do you think? What's your hope?
Our timeline is 2025, but really none of this can come together if we can't rally around, funders, supporters that really are focused on food development, but also equity within Muskegon County. And also those that just understand that food is an extension of culture, is an extension of our identity. What we create in both a home space and also a commercial kitchen is a direct reflection of who we are. And so we're just excited to support food businesses that have been here or also been, throughout the area under the table to really come forward and to present their offerings to the community.
Create life in those businesses.
Yes,
and bring it to the forefront. Andrea Copeland with Lakeshore Flavor, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
It's not just groups like Lakeshore Flavor working to make change. Organizations like the Southeast Market in Grand Rapids are answering the call to the 49507 area, which has largely been called a food desert. Access of West Michigan invites communities into their fresh markets, allowing folks to shop for healthy produce at lower costs. And Feeding America West Michigan has been working for decades to feed our community, currently serving the at least 261,000 people in West Michigan and the Upper Peninsula battling food insecurity. But in order for all of these organizations to work, we need food itself, produce like fruits and veggies, or protein like meat and eggs. It's a good thing that Michigan is home to 10 million acres of farmland and roughly 47,600 farms. But as you may have guessed it, not all that land is equitably spread. And if we're going to talk about food equity, we need to include food from its earliest life in the discussion. And when it comes to farming, people of color are drastically underrepresented in the farming landscape, only making up 0.4% of farmers in Michigan. The Farmers of Color Land Fund sprouted up last year in hopes of expanding land ownership in West Michigan, reclaiming agricultural practices, and addressing past generational injustices to create pockets of green urban spaces and food security. Let's take a look at their mission.
BIPOC farmers have historically been pushed out of America's landscape, and today access is among the top challenges facing farmers of color across the country. With about 40% of all U.S. farmland being leased, agriculture experts say many growers are being financially forced off land or out of the industry.
I was talking to all these farmers in our food ecosystem here in West Michigan and learning more about the disparities that farmers, small farmers in general experience, but then there's another layer for farmers of color when it comes to accessing land, getting funding for their businesses and farms, and managing all the things that go into a farm business.
The West Michigan Farmers of Color Land Fund hopes to create change on the local level. The project has a fundraising goal of $50,000, which will be used to help support BIPOC farmers in purchasing or maintaining land ownership, as well as connecting with area growers, like Lynette Moore.
Are you? Oh, she's in labor. Oh. Give her a little bit of privacy.
Moore is a farmer out of Muskegon and owner of Moore Garden and Farm, LLC.
I think this is the one. Yeah, these are super warm. I'm sorry. So this would be the nasty part of the job, because you're literally touching poop all the time. And this is just from one bird.
While she has a full-fledged operation now,
we're a vegetable/animal farm. We're not year-round as far as animals, as far as pigs and such things like that, but we do keep chickens all year round.
When she first started as a grower, her only area to pot was her driveway and porch.
We built from the ground up with our own money. So it's not like we've had like a bunch of grants or, you know, loans that have been keeping us going. So just the fact that we could do it on our own, it's a big struggle, but it's a big accomplishment at the same time.
Moore says having navigated her own journey to land ownership, she wants to help new farmers get connected to education and resources to create more unity in the farming community. President of the West Michigan Farmers of Color Land Fund, Alita Kelly, says relationships like this are what make up the fund's overall mission.
I see the fund as more than just an opportunity to capitalize farming projects. It's about creating a network of people who have similar goals and bonding together and finding safety in being able to share each other's experiences with one another and sharing resources that we come across together, and really building this family of people who are trying to move this area forward.
The project is still in its fundraising phase. Kelly says once the land fund hits $50,000, the group will open applications to local farmers. The money will go towards increasing industry opportunities for people of color who have been systemically pushed out over generations. Kelly says it's an opportunity for people to help repair the harm the country has been complicit in.
When you really look back to our history and how this country was built, it was built on through the labor of people of color, specifically Black Americans. And so for us, it's more about moving the conversation from equity to atonement and what's our responsibility to the people that built this country, that we all benefit from now.
What I love about everything we talked about today is it really perfectly kind of comes together. So we talk about the importance of having healthy food available, also having culturally competent food available, and then being able to look at who specifically is growing this food and is that an equitable process.
Right, and looking at African American farmers, it kind of goes full circle because that's where it would start with growing the food and the need for that being more on an equitable plane.
Right.
And we're seeing that a little bit, but there's so much work to do, and Alita Kelly, of course, alluded to a lot of that in your conversation with her as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it took me for a shock to find out that just 0.4% of people of color make up the farmers here in the state of Michigan. That number is, I think, drastically low, especially with so many people now wanting to get in and wanting to become growers.
There are a lot of people who are, we have home gardens, we have other places that start gardens for people personally, but there's so much more, and like you said, those statistics are quite alarming, which then takes us to the next phase of becoming more equitable across the board as it relates to entrepreneurship.
Absolutely.
Like Andrea Copeland talked about. That's important as well, kind of getting that fair playing field so that you can start a business. There's so many barriers, as she mentioned, in just getting to square one. You've got people who have a great idea or they have great food products, but they can't get them from their kitchen because the cottage food availability, the fact that you need a commercial kitchen to cook and then sell your wares, that is a stumbling block, as well as just being able to get the funding to say, I have a business or a storefront. Those things are still effort in the process, right?
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot of systems barriers, and then I think almost just a personal one there, that representation model. So if you're not seeing someone that looks like you doing this type of work, what makes you think, hey, I can do it too? Because starting a business, going out on that venture, that's a huge jump. And if you've not seen someone like you do it, you've got guts, Well,
the guts, but also the capital. The barriers there are the capital. And she said, I can't remember the exact percentage. I want to say 1% of African American or Black businesses have received loans out of the entire amount of, it's not adding up.
Absolutely. And with that then comes the food equity portion of what gets distributed into communities, of which brown and black are on the lower end. Immigrants are on the lower end. Single mothers on the lower end. And that was something I really connected with just growing up with a single mom. We didn't worry about, when food would be readily available, but we lived in a rural town. It was kind of a hike to spend our gas money with, a single person's income to go all the way to the Walmart and then spend more money on like healthy fruits and vegetables. And so putting it into perspective and looking at the statistics, I think it really gives me a lot of appreciation for what I had growing up with her. It is important to get those nutritious, nutrient dense, those fruits and veggies and protein in, for sure.
And that's the whole idea behind the Trinity Health. They're pushing forth healthy foods.
Absolutely, that lead to healthy bodies. And that's, I think, the most important part of this whole thing.
Absolutely, healthy bodies indeed. And so you don't forget anything that you learned today, because we surely have learned a lot. So we've got a big list of resources on our screen that you can visit and then link to this episode on our website.
Yep, and there is no way that we can cover all aspects of food insecurity. We know that. So we hope that this gives you just the tools that it takes to start those important conversations and explore more.
And we will be back next week, but don't forget to follow us, of course, on our WGVU Facebook and YouTube pages to keep up with all the happenings here in West Michigan.
Yes, and Jennifer and I, we are so excited to see you again. But until next time, thank you so much for watching and helping us be mutually inclusive.